Peace. This is A and B, African man born on the Culture Speaks, a true hip hop podcast for those who live it. Let's get into it.
I am hip-hop culture, predator the vultures. Rappers getting high, spitting lines, I be sober. Never need an entourage, Part2 who holds us down when I come around. Massachusetts soul child, say me in your masu. Knowledge will surpass you. Silly rap crews, walking shady as they move. I am the god man, I be living in the proof. I be teaching all the youth on the elements they use. Turn the television off, all the government is plotting on our sons, and we disrespect our daughters as we living in the slums, and we stay.
Peace. This is A and B, African man born on the Culture Speaks, a true hip hop podcast for those who live it.
Make decisions like a grown man and plan my future up for the unity to take it over. Gather everyone. This is who I am as I'm representing hip hop. I will take a stand while I'm representing hip hop. Gotta be my best as I'm representing hip hop. God in the flesh as I'm representing hip hop. This is who I am as I'm representing hip hop. I will take a stand while I'm representing hip hop. Gotta be my best as I'm representing hip hop. God in the flesh as I'm representing hip hop.
Peace. Welcome back to the Culture Speaks, a true hip hop podcast for those who live it. So, in the intro, I talked about how our spiritual influences. All right, we have many spiritual influences. We're not negating the religious influences. We're not negating different paths and walks to life, because hip hop is not a religion. Hip hop is a culture stemming from music and gathering of people to separate themselves from the violence and the gangs and the separation and poverty that we experienced, especially in New York back in the early 70s. All right. Now, at a certain period of time, there was two particular cultures, right, that made its influence into the culture. And even though a lot of people didn't respect it, all right, they still had the influence. One being the nations of gods and earths, which extended from a member of the Nation of Islam. All right, because at the time Islam was pretty prevalent in the black community, and it was looked at as the black man's religion. As Muhammad Ali said, the late great Muhammad Ali would say that Islam is the black man's religion. That's where he proclaimed his spiritual journey, which is where he get his name Muhammad Ali from. All right, because he was first named Cassius Clay. You see what I'm saying? You know, so, but he became Muhammad Ali at a certain point, especially after he won the championship versus Sonny Liston. So, when you get into the influence of the nations of gods and earths, I'm gonna give you brief information on these on each leader. All right, and it's not to sway you to go to different each one or different ones. It is to just give you a historical lesson on the influences of hip-hop and where hip-hop should be at in this point. Hip-hop should be on a religious less, exoteric less, and these are not words, I'm just making them up, by the way, journey into spirituality, where we are balancing out the world with our sound, our culture, our music, our way of life. We should be a part of bettering what's going on in the world. Yeah, we got the party stuff, we got the street stuff, we got the ratchet stuff, we got the hoe stuff, we got the drug dealing stuff, but we need that spiritual food. You know what I mean? Right now, all that other stuff is candy in comparison to what we need to know and what we need to nourish our ears with, as far as hip-hop music and rap music is concerned, and what the culture is and the way of life and what we should be doing. All right, so one of the leaders is Clarence 13X. Clarence 13X, also known as Allah the Father or Father Allah, was born Clarence Edward Smith, February 22nd, 1928. He died in June 13th, 1969. Was an American religious leader and the founder of the 5% Nation. He was born in Virginia and moved to New York City as a young man before serving in the United States Army during the Korean War. After returning to New York, he learned that his wife had joined the Nation of Islam, the NOI. He followed her, taking the name Clarence 13X. He served in the group as a security officer, martial arts instructor, and student minister before leaving for unclear reasons in 1963. He enjoyed gambling, which was condemned by the NOI, and disagreed with their teachings that Wallace Fard Muhammad was a divine messenger. All right, to stop you right there, he was on the military of the NOI, which is the FOI, Fruits of Islam. And you see a lot of those brothers that stand next to Farrakhan and Dr. Wesley Muhammad and others over here. They stand next to their leaders in different divisions of who the NOI is. Those guys are the Fruits of Islam. They don't play no games. A lot of them are the security. They stand pretty firm on protecting their leader and also protecting their people and making sure that there's peace at their gatherings. You know what I mean? And anytime they're giving a speech or a lecture, you always see about 3 or 4 of them on the stage protecting the teachers, and then you see them in order around the venue to make sure that nothing goes down. You can't go past an event. A lot of hip hop events, especially here in Boston, you can actually request the Nation of Islam to be there, and nobody plays games with it. I don't care how street you are. I don't care how thug you are. I don't care if you ain't got no order with yourself. You ain't gonna attack no Fruits of Islam members. All right, and if you looked at the Malcolm X movie, Malcolm X, he had the Fruits of Islam in order. They made sure they protected Brother Malcolm, because Brother Malcolm's one of the most profound speakers. Before Farrakhan, you had Brother Malcolm. And Brother Malcolm, if you know the infamous scene in Malcolm X the movie with Denzel Washington, you seen that they stood their ground when one of those brothers got beat up by the cops. You know, and they called upon him. I think it was I don't know if it was in Chicago or New York. You know, and those brothers stood their ground until he got the medical attention that he needed, and then he dispersed them properly in order. All right. So when you talk about the Fruits of Islam, that's who Clarence 13X was. He was one of them. You know what I'm saying? So now you got to look at it for what it is when it comes to the 5% Nation and the brothers that they try to get. They try to get brothers off the street. Remember, these brothers are still street. These brothers are still coming from the gutter. So the type of people that he was getting, prisoners and street cats and drug dealers, he was trying to get them off the street to learn this divine doctrine, which they know as the nations of the gods and earths, and getting them on board with teaching the people. The 85% are deaf, dumb, and blind. 10% know, but conceal the information, and then 5% of those are the ones out here teaching in the world. That's their mathematics system that they live by. And there's a lot of 5%ers today. You can go to New York, in Harlem. They have a school over there. I think it's between Adams Clayton Boulevard over there, and you see 125th. I've been in that school where they had some hip hop performance in there, and it was ran by 5%ers. So they're out here. They have a particular purpose. I've ran into them a number of times. I had some good conversations and builds with them, and I've also had some negative ones here in Cambridge after a show. But that's not important, because it's not important to always address the negative, but it does happen. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, brothers, what you have to get from it, brothers and sisters, about the Nation of Islam and all of them. Everybody has disagreements, and people form their different factions for a specific reason, but you're all on the same side. What you have to do is combine and come together with those disagreements and fight the good fight, because the real fight is not against each other. You can destroy the real fight that you would have to give to the enemy when you fight each other just because you have disagreements. So he decided to go and create the nations of gods and earth. He only lived, he only until 1969. You know what I'm saying? So it's in his 6 years building, you know what I'm saying, that whole movement is a widespread journey into hip hop, where you have so many different artists, so many different DJs, so many different people that represent the Nation of Islam. So my favorite group, Wu-Tang Clan, they study the nations of gods and earths. especially like RZA, Jizza, ODB, rest in peace. You know, what I mean, they were the main guys that brought 5% teachings to the clan. All right. Then you have Brand Nubians who came out in the 80s, late 80s. You know what I mean? Then you had Rakim, one of the biggest 5% artists of all time. You know what I mean? He wears the number 7 on his chain. You know what I'm saying? He's one of the biggest artists that wore the 7 on his chain. All right. You have so many. Nas dipped into it a little bit. You have so many different ones. You know what I'm saying? From MF Doom, rest in peace. You had Guru from Gangstar get into it a little bit and talk about knowledge of self. Anytime you heard an artist talk about knowledge of self, you heard them talk about, like, you know, when they say knowledge of self, they've dipped into a little bit of these teachings from the nations of gods and earth. And I think it's all necessary because everybody needs a foundation. You know what I'm saying? But these artists definitely brought attention to consciousness. Not just like with KRS-One. It was a little bit different with KRS-One because KRS-One, he kind of he brought teaching to the black community by way of more of a humanist standpoint at a certain point. So when he first came out, he was just a street dude that was trying to get on, but also tried to teach by way of the Criminal Minded album. Then he went All Means Necessary. He was, you know, still establishing himself as one of the best artists, but then he became more of a philosopher. So he dealt with a lot of philosophy and the teachings of philosophy and added them to hip hop culture to bring consciousness to it. But also, as he got a little bit older, he started connected to the more humanist standpoint, not really making it about race, even though most of all things that we deal with in society as black folks were racist. You know what I'm saying? And he didn't negate the racial aspects of it. He just brought more attention to the whole humanist aspect of it, which a lot of people disagree with, which is where he had beef with certain artists. You know what I'm saying? Because the 5% doctrine seemed more geared towards the black man being God, right? You know, he ended with Allah being, you know, arm, leg, arm, head. So you go around. You know what I'm saying? So that right there, when you're dealing with the 5% teachings, it was dealing with the supreme knowledge of the supreme being, which is the black man as God, the black woman as the earth, and dealing with the science of math and dealing with the acronyms that they use to go through their daily life. And then they had the lessons, 120 lessons, where they also dealt with, you know, you had to memorize these lessons as your daily way of life. You know what I mean? So somebody come up to you and they would literally test you and be like, listen, what's today's mathematics, God? And then you had to pretty much know today's mathematics. All right? And some brothers, from what I've heard, some brothers, you know, if you didn't know your shit, you know what I mean? It was lights out, depending on the brothers that you're dealing with, because they want you to know that. You know what I mean? However you feel about it, that's just the way it was. So that's where, you know, but when you look at where hip hop is heavily influenced, it was probably most influenced by the nations of gods and earth. A lot of those guys were 5%. I think Big Daddy Kane was probably a 5% at some point. I mean, he would have to tell you himself, but from what I've heard him, the way he talks, he seemed like he was into the 5% doctrine a lot. A lot of New York rappers were into it. And then at a certain point, you know what I mean? There was a different teaching that was being put into the hip hop world. All right, not to counter the 5%, but just to add on and bring a different level of spirituality, which is where you see a lot of Egyptian images. This was dealing with what you know as the Nuwapian nation, or the nation of Islamic Hebrews, also ran by the who known as Dr. York. All right, he was also an artist as well. So when we come back, we're going to get into the teachings of Dr. York, and we're going to get into the brief influence of how he influenced hip-hop even on to this day. All right? So we'll see you on the next segment. Peace.